Called to Serve features real stories from police officers. Episodes may include descriptions of traumatic events, including physical harm, death, emotional experiences, or other sensitive topics. Discretion is advised.
I'm Sergeant Angie Tetley,
And I'm the best part of your day, Constable Brennan Martin.
and this is Called to Serve.
Let's go. Oh, set that drag. We got the big fish on here, Ange. Cut. Here we go. Here we go. Oh.
What's wrong with you?
Listen, if there's one thing I've learned is that if you want to get the big fish, you got to use the big tackle, and we did that. And today we have Acting Inspector Scott Neilson, who is also the Staff Sergeant of 8th District, career patrol guy. Super pumped to speak to you today, brother. We're excited to talk about you being in patrol and your career in patrol and what you did before that. But before we do that, let's just give you a little intro. All right. So you're 50-ish is what you said. You wouldn't even say.
It's Whoa, burn already.
Oil of Olay commercial. How old do you think I am?
Couldn't even tell. The salt and pepper is totally George
You
Clooney.
put on the wrinkle and gray filter on the cameras, I'm sure, right?
24 and a half years service. You actually are very close to 25 years now, I think, since the last time.
24 years, 11 months, and about 10 days.
That is wild.
But who's counting?
Yeah, that is wild. And you have zero intention of retiring. You started in class 130 around Christmas 1999. And for the young pups out there, they were just walking around in diapers at that point in time. So you've been around a long time. Your service has been huge. You've been deployed in 2 district, 1 district, 6 district, APU, RTOC, and District 8.
I think you have a very unique career in the fact that you have spent the whole time on patrol. Like from day one, like you're always on patrol. And I'm very excited to have you here and to tell your story. But let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? And where'd you go to school? What were you like as a kid?
I mean, how can I live up to that introduction? Just big fish, put it out in perspective. Plenty of big fish in this organization, bigger than me. But yeah, born and bred Calgarian. We're a rare breed.
Very.
Grew up in Varsity Acres in the Northwest. Yeah, I was your usual suburban kid, spoiled, rotten by my parents. Played hockey growing up till I was in high school. Played soccer, just your general run-of-the-mill neighborhood kid doing his thing. So
Calgary kid, born and bred.
Born and bred. Like I said, there's not very many of us around now. It's harder to find people that were actually born and raised here. So
Totally. So you did go to journalism school in Vancouver. So that was your career goal, was to be a journalist, sports writer, in fact, right?
Yeah, I mean, originally I was going to follow my dad's footsteps and go into business. That's what he would have liked to see me do, and found out very quickly that the world of shirts and ties was not going to be my thing. Jeans and Doc Martens was more my thing. So
Tell us about your time in Vancouver. I think your journalism background is very, very interesting. So tell us about that.
yeah, I originally started out, my goal was to be a sports reporter. That was my initial thing. But I found out very quickly that, and it was more at the community level that I started at. So there's lots of local sports. I learned very much about the sport of lacrosse, learned to love that, box lacrosse. There's some big teams out there like New West Salmon Bellies and stuff. They're like an institution in the lacrosse world, things like that. But I learned very quickly when we had a publishing change one time, and they wanted more along community sports, the tyke hockey and things like that, that was not really the direction that I was planning on going. And the opportunity came up to take on the City Hall beat, but the kudos of taking that would be get the police beat, which I'd always kind of had an interest in while I was doing sports. So when that opening came up, I took a good, quick, hard look at that and jumped at that. And moved into that.
That is wild. I do know that you were invited on a drug search warrant, and I want to get into that. But given that it was the 90s, I'm trying to picture it. Were you full mullet?
I was.
I love it. Full mullet. Joe Dirt sitting at our table right now.
I had the permed back hair for a bit more fuller look at the back, and the earring. I had it all going on. I was your 90s kid for sure.
Classic.
So yeah, I remember my column mugshot was definitely in full mullet and some feathered hair and stuff like that. So
one of your first experiences was with the Burnaby bike team, right?
Yeah. I think that was one of the first. I want to do things a little bit differently in terms of just like talking to talking heads and do a little bit more reporting from doing, like the doing angles. So I arranged to have a ride along, so to speak, with the Burnaby bike squad, a couple of their bike officers, and spent the day riding around with them all through, again, those who know the Lower Mainland, Central Park, Metrotown, all those kinds of things. And that just kind of reported, got the full page spread, took my own photos and had the full page spread with that. And that was a lot of fun. There was a little bit of, I think, coming to an understanding on what we were going to report on and what we would say, just in terms of talking and stuff like that. Not that I was betraying any confidence or anything, but I think they weren't used to someone with them all the time. So we had to find some common ground. Once the story came out, there was some, I didn't know that was on the record, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I mean, I was still learning too. I was just like fresh out of J school, so it was a learning thing for me as well. But we got over that hump. It was still good in the end.
So it must have been challenging to build that relationship because, as a journalist, you're kind of looking for maybe the juicy story or a bit of a controversial story. So when you're riding with the police and you're going to see what they do every day, and not everything is nice that we have to do every day, right?
No.
So that was sort of where the, maybe not conflict, but just how you guys interacted and, like you say, come to that common ground where you still want to tell the story real and raw, but they want to be seen in a positive light, because we all, as police officers, need to want to be have the public trust and be seen in that positive light.
Right. I found very quickly in that role that there was so much more that the police were doing that I wanted to report on that people needed to know about.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to go on the bus. I wanted to go on that's when my first ride-alongs came along, just riding around in a patrol car, kind of seeing things from their eyes and stuff like that, and being able to report on that. Like, to me, that was way more interesting than, the churned out public, PR release in the morning that you would just call for a comment on. And, that was just so boring to me. And that was just something that I was like, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it differently. So that's kind of the direction I chose to take with it.
So because of your ability to tell their story and maybe share things that they weren't used to the media sharing, you did get invited, like BM said, on a drug. Like, was it a warrant?
Yeah, it was a drug warrant that I went on to. I was with the head of their drug squad, and I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was like pouring rain. I think it was in like in November or something, and they were doing a takedown at a house with their ERT team and stuff like that. And we were stationed a little bit back, and so they're like, "Here's your radio, you can listen to." So I just sat there and watched them. Everyone move in. Everyone in the house was contained, and then they went in, took the door with the ram, the whole 9 yards, and I'm like, let's go. I went to jump out of the car, and the guy was like, whoa, well, hold on there, Junior. Where do you think you're going? And I'm like, I'm going in the house, right? And he's like, no, you're sitting here. Like, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
First of all, the scene's not safe. Second of all, you're not going in there. You're not on the
You
warrant.
actually are not the
You're not
police?
on the
Yeah, you're not the police. You're not on the warrant. You're staying where you're staying. And I just remember the amount of disappointment I had. I was just like, this
You want it in there
I
so
wanted it in
bad.
there so bad, which
Yeah.
was different. And like I said, I'd never had that before to that point on that beat. And I was like, I want to get in that room. I want to see what goes on in there, right? I want to.
So do you think that this experience, like in reporting on the police and that overwhelming feeling of wanting to be in there and to sort of be part of that action, was that sort of like a catalyst to potentially pursuing policing as a career?
Yeah, I mean, there was that. I mean, that was one of the main things. And then I think the other thing that really sort of struck me in terms of like wanting to take that extra step was I covered a story because we had a sister paper in New Westminster, and I had the opportunity to, I heard about a story where one of our seniors in the community knew us was an aged, more of an aged population. There was an older population living there, and got this story from the media person about a poor lady who had her place broken into, and this dirtbag had gone in and not only robbed her, but then to pour salt in the wound, sexually assaulted her. And so I remember hearing about that and thinking, I know the media's always seen as being kind of intrusive at times, but to me it's like, I want to know what that's, if she's willing to tell the story, I want to know what that's like. And fortunately, I had to go through the police. Of course, they checked out with the victim first and all the rest. And I was able to sit down with her and talk to her for about an hour. And it blew me away. Like, I'd never been affected by crime happening to somebody else like that before in my life. And I wanted to make sure I told that story and respect like what she had to go through in that. And I mean, she was so thankful for me doing that story, and it was later submitted, and I didn't do it for award purposes. I didn't even know awards existed. And it was just something that came out at the year provincial writing awards and stuff through the BC community newspaper. I can't remember what the association was called, but I remember my editor had submitted it unbeknownst to me, and finding out like months later, guess what? You won an award for this story. And it really wasn't me that should have had the award, right? Like I just told the story. It was actually them and having the trust in me. And that was, I remember thinking the whole time when I was listening to that story, it's like, oh, I want to catch this guy.
Yeah.
Like I hope that they catch this guy. And what would I do if I could like go catch him? That's probably where the spark really was sort of like.
That was what lit the fire to be like, I'm going to change careers.
Absolutely. And by that point, like I said, I'd kept on the beat for a few years and taken on a number of different departments. There was Burnaby, there was New Westminster, Coquitlam RCMP, but it was really with the Port Moody when I was covering them as well, and did some stories in with them and met some really cool people that were, you know, very appreciative of sort of the angle they did. I kept that sort of mentality I had before about not just telling their story, but how they do it and why they were doing the things that they were doing and the different units in this department and stuff. And that's when they were like, you should really think about doing this. And I was like, well, funny you should mention that.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
And so that process started back in about 1998.
Yeah.
And they started to kind of get me going on that. And my goal initially was to get onto the force out on the West Coast.
Right.
VPD.
Yeah. VPD, yeah.
But you also applied to the CPS. Why did you apply to the CPS as well?
I had come back for a leave of absence for a little while in the mid-90s just to come back to Calgary. And
Because your family was here.
my family was here, right? And Deputy Cook, who was a constable at the time, got me a gig helping the analysts down in one district. And I learned a lot about kind of how the business of policing works. And it was quite cool to see that. And mapping crime and stuff was kind of what I was doing. But I knew Calgary had a reputation just from talking to the people out on the West Coast. People can say whatever they want, but Calgary has an amazing reputation. And even back in the 90s was kind of looked upon as an elite, kind of setting the bar for everybody else in terms of training and progressive and that type of stuff. So I just thought, well, you know, the idea back then is you apply to everywhere and see who takes you. And I thought, well, if I have to go back to Calgary, even though I didn't really want to go back at the time, if I have to go back, at least I have family here and at least I'm going to a department that has the reputation that it does.
Yeah.
And as it kind of pans out, that's sort of the way things went.
So you did tell us a story before about like the transition from being a journalist to a police officer, about the concept of how far would you go to protect a source. Tell us about that conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, right. Well, out in the West Coast, at least they used to do this. Part of your application process was to go through the Justice Institute, and all the officers out there for municipal departments are trained in one central area. So you have to go for a day of role playing and an interview with a sworn member. And I remember doing the role playing, which I was never a fan of, still am not to this day. But during the part of the interview, I remember interviewing with an individual from Saanich, and the question came up about me being in the media. And the question came up, well, how far would you go to protect a source? It was not a big deal to me. I mean, I'm not at the New York Times level. I'm not going deep undercover into any big operations for months at a time. I said, well, theoretically, I would go to jail to protect a source. And I remember looking at him, and he just looked at me and kind of looked
Wrong answer.
Looked kind of down
Glasses
over his
down.
glasses down, right? And I'm like, there's this like awkward silence for a long time. And I'm like,
It's not good.
right? I'm like, uh-oh. And he's like, I said, is that not? And he's like, I'm just struggling here to understand why someone who wants to get into this profession is now sitting in front of an officer saying that they would break the law to protect a source. You're openly talking about breaking the law. And I'm like, I'm backtracking, like I got the jazz hands out. And I'm like, no. I said, I've never done it. But I said, if you want to talk theory in journalism, that's what you would do.
Yeah, and that's what you're taught.
That's what you're taught, right? The same way I would do what I'm taught if I get into policing type thing, right? Like, I've never done it, nor do I see myself ever doing it, but that is theoretically. And he just kept hitting. And I was like, I was just watching in his face. I'm like, right?
Career down the drain.
Cue the trumpet kind of going, and so, they total your marks and all the rest, and you needed a 2 to move on. And not surprisingly, I had a 2-. And so I was deferred at the time. And yeah, that was a little disheartening, but it kind of gave me a little bit of an insight. I'm like, okay, well, here's what might come up in the future. So how are you going to work around that?
Yeah, amazing.
So ultimately, you ended up going with the CPS. You applied to VPD and the CPS at the same time. Can you describe your application experience with the CPS, how you found out, and what those first few weeks were like?
Yeah, like I said, with CPS, it was something, not that I didn't want to join the department, but it was like my life was settled out on the West Coast. So it wasn't, it was like 1 was VPD, 1A was Calgary. And, so I was kind of going through that at different times. And I remember at the time when I found out that the VPD thing wasn't going to work because of the Justice Institute, coincidentally enough, was on the same day that I was supposed to fly back to Calgary for my interview. So obviously my eggs were all in one basket. I hadn't really prepared for my interview as well as I thought in my back of my head, and came in and knocked it out of the park and got through the interview portion, and I was on my way. And it was at that time where I started to think, okay, well, this is probably going to happen with Calgary. And it carried on for a couple of months. And I remember finding out in November of '99 that I got the call. Tat Ing and Todd Rolfson were my file managers. And I remember getting the phone call at the time at, it was like one of our deadline days at the paper. So I was right in the middle of like going to press and stuff, and got the phone call. And I remember hearing before that at the time, it's like, it doesn't matter if they want you to start yesterday, you take whatever they're going to give you. Right. And so when I think it was Todd that called me and said, they kind of give you the old snowing, like, I got bad news.
All those file managers,
they like messing with you.
Right? A little bit of mess, a little bit of head games with me, right? And said what? I'm like, right? And he's like, yeah, I got bad news. Like, I need an answer from you, and if you can start in a month. And I'm just like, I was ecstatic. But I'm in the throes of deadline, right? I got my editor like, where's your whatever piece on this and this? And I'm like trying to soak up the moment, but I'm quietly ecstatic while all this nonsense is going on. But then realizing that my class is literally starting in less than a month.
I know that after you graduated from class 130, you have a whole bunch of deployments, but you went to District 2, and you have a pretty interesting story of your first time ever seeing the blood and gore.
Yeah, there's things that you get prepared for in classes that you can kind of imagine and things like that. And then there's things that you actually see that kind of put things in a whole new perspective. And I know that it was probably within the first, I came out in June of 2000. It probably was that fall or something, right? And I remember responding to a 1014 or disturbance call, Inglemoorgan kind of thing. And it was just chaos when we got there. And people were running around everywhere. There'd been some type of knife fight. And I know there was an ambulance right nearby there. And Steve Ross, retired Steve Ross, was 1201. And he said, we need someone to go with this badly injured person. New guy slapped me on the back, pushed me in the back.
Always, new guy always has to go with the gross ones.
Towards the ambulance and said, jump in, you're riding continuity. And so the back of the ambulance doors swung open, and I was confronted with medics working on this individual whose insides were now
on the outside.
Yeah. And it was just kind of like, you just kind of freeze for a second, and it's like, whoa, right? Like as I said, I'd grown up a very spoiled.
Yeah, but who has experience with that?
And nobody has experience with that, right? You can see all the movies you want and play all the video games you want, but there you are, it's right in your face kind of thing. And kind of stood there for a second, and then somebody else is like, get going, boonk.
Yeah.
In the ambulance you go, and off you go. And your job is to follow this person wherever they go, through surgery, continuity, that whole thing. Or that's the way I took it. Mm-hmm. And so off I went and just kind of squeezed myself back into the corner while they were doing this incredible work to try to keep this person alive. So
what do you? So I think that often happens for us, like, or even for new recruits, where they don't actually think about what you're going to be exposed to in the job, like as a police officer. So, one of your first District 2 is where you went right out of classes.
Yeah, right out of classes. I mean, at that time, they were joking about 2 District was very quiet and very slow, but it was anything but. I had a great, like I said, I had a great team, and everybody was young, and we found our own stuff, and we had bank view, and it was just, again, it was, you found your own stuff, and there was never a dull moment. So, but yeah, 2 District was my first stop.
So in experiencing the, you know, the busyness of 2 District and sort of the trauma and the terrible things that we see as police officers, you have another example of when you were in 1 District about a little girl that was killed.
Next time on Part 2.
A bad accident happened down near the Calgary Tower. There'd been a piece of sheet metal that hadn't been secured on top of a neighboring building that had come off during a windstorm or something, and a poor little girl had been hit.